Today I'm going to talk to you all about the big and bad word, the word your parents never ever wanted you to be associated with. That's right, kids, let's talk about drugs. I'm talking hard drugs too. Now let's get into it. The legality of drugs is something that has been questioned for ages. Should people be free to have whatever drugs they want? The reality is no. Yeah, can you believe it? Our parents are actually right on something. Some drugs are very bad for us. On a real note, drug addiction is actually a very serious issue, and for decades the government has been trying to solve this crisis. However, I believe that our current laws and regulations on drugs are not solving the issue one bit. Today I want to discuss the war on drugs and how they have led to current laws that sadly do more harm than good, while convincing you that the decriminalization of all drugs in America is the solution to our drug crisis. After conducting countless hours of research upon the subject and reading numerous credible articles, I feel I'm prepared to give you a compelling argument today on why all drugs should be decriminalized in America. Since the days of our young youth, we have been told to stay away from drugs, simply because the hardcore ones can truly cause a lot of harm to you. More than ever before, we are seeing early addictions begin to form in our youth, and it raises the question, what needs to be done to solve this drug crisis America has endured for years upon years? Before you try to solve a problem, you need to identify it first, so allow me to tell you what I think is the problem. Current drug regulations are simply doing more harm than good. Alright, so before I get into this issue, I want to interact with you all in the audience a little bit. So give me a show of hands for how many of you have done illegal drugs. Psych, I ain't no narc, just thought I'd get your attention. But I saw you out there, Timmy. Dr. Newman, I don't know, were you about to raise hands? I don't know, I kind of saw you, but we'll skip, alright. So for one, drug use in America steadily seems to rise each year. According to data listed on drugabuse.gov, 10th graders have seen an annual rise by 1% for those who have taken illicit drugs in their lifetime, according to a study done from 2016 to 2019. Now, more demographics have been affected by drug abuse in the 21st century, according to dualdiagnosis.org, with lots of drug abusers coming from wealthy and successful people, unlike the typical stereotype of poor people being the main victims from them. Women have also seen an increase in drug abuse, with frequent use and experimentation with harder drugs than they typically observed in the late 20th century. While minor fluctuations take place from year to year, graphs and data released by drugabuse.com showed an overall 2.6% increase in illicit drug use by Americans from 2005 to 2015. Second, is current laws prompt a lot of violence to occur. Gangs and drugs are a huge leader in crimes that occur here in America, and with crimes come violence. According to the U.S. Department of Justice Drug and Crime Sector, drugs are inherently connected to crime in various ways. Drug abuse leads people to make stupid decisions like commit robbery or assault. Drugs also create a huge black market that is led by dangerous gangs and groups all throughout the country. Lastly, drug laws have created the mess of mass incarceration over the past few decades. For those of you who don't know, the U.S. is the world's leader in incarceration in comparison to any other country. The sentencingproject.org states that we have 2.2 million people in jail and prison systems currently. In the 1980s, only 40,900 people were incarcerated due to drug-related crimes, but in 2017 there were 452,964 people incarcerated for the same exact drug-related crimes, according to the sentencingproject.org. This is not just a matter of population growth over the years, but it stems from a more serious issue rather. Thousands upon thousands of innocent American drug users are arrested each year. DrugPolicy.org states that nearly every year around 500,000 Americans are arrested for marijuana offenses. As you can see, society is clearly struggling with solving the issue of drug use, as our current regulations on them seem to cause more people to partake in using them. They create more violence thanks to the prevalence of addicts in our communities, and have led to the mess of mass incarceration. So why is it that our current drug policies are failing so bad? What has caused this? The answer is we provided the wrong solution to the problem. Now this answer was the war on drugs. I want you all to think about what you know about the war on drugs. You've probably heard of it at some point or another, so real quick in your mind, go over what you think this war did and perhaps the effects it's had on our society. What is the war on drugs? The war on drugs was a term coined in the 1970s representing the government's initiative to decrease illegal drug use and major distribution and selling of these drugs by enforcing greater punishments to both drug users and dealers. To this day, this so-called war is a very controversial topic, as many believe it has been hidden racist and political agendas behind it, according to an article written by History.com. So let's get some background on the war on drugs. In June of 1971, President Nixon declared the war on drugs due to an increasing rise of drug use in youth and associated problems it has brought along, such as rebellious generations, negative social effects, and increasing demands by citizens for a solution to this drug problem. In the 1980s, growing fear of drug abuse was surrounding the American public thanks to media outlets' endless talk of the new addiction to crack, a new drug that had just came out. President Ronald Reagan was electing during this time and had a strong anti-drug policy as a part of his campaign. This set up the 80s to lead a strict zero tolerance on drugs, which is why mass incarceration began to skyrocket. The following years, elected presidents continued to urge on the war on drugs in aims to finally end the issue, but sadly that point in time never came. George W. Bush in the early 2000s then allocated more money than ever before to the war on drugs, according to drugpolicy.org, causing an increase in drug raids throughout the nation and locking away thousands of nonviolent criminals on drug charges. So you may be asking, what has been accomplished through this war? So what was accomplished by this war on drugs? Well, it made the U.S. spend nearly $46 billion each year to aid in its efforts. It killed thousands in the process of fighting the drug cartel's influence in the U.S., and it had the country reach its highest rate of incarceration, with 2.3 million people locked up in the year of 2016. Not to mention, illicit drug use in America has not seen a significant drop, despite all the time and resources that has been put into this war. The war on drugs has destroyed the families of many households, especially in the African American community. The tough legal punishments that the war on drugs has created means more family members in these struggling communities are placed in a vicious prison cycle. According to Cato.org, keeping illicit drugs illegal means market prices are very high, and thus people in poor communities are more likely to start selling drugs to make better money than working as they would at a regular job. In return, you see this war on drugs supporting the racial divide we have here in America, locking away thousands of African Americans and other struggling races. In 2010, statistics showed that while African Americans only make up 13% of the population, they surprisingly make up 40% of the incarcerated population. So now that we know what the war on drugs is, the history tracing back to the 1970s, and its proven lack of success throughout the decades, I hope you now have some better insight onto why this is not the solution to our drug crisis, but rather the cause of so many other issues in society. The war on drugs tried cracking down on drugs to the smallest point, but history shows that prohibiting something doesn't stop people from finding a way to obtain it. Therefore, let's talk about a solution that could actually help: the decriminalization of all drugs in America. Okay, I know what you're all thinking, like, damn, this guy is crazy. Is he really suggesting that we just let it be okay for everyone to possess whatever hard drug they want? Well, yes, I am crazy, and yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. The reality is, drug users are going to use whether they are told to or they told they can't, because it's an addiction taking them over, and sending them to jail on possession of drugs is not the solution to the problem. So how would decriminalizing all drugs help? First, mass incarceration would be a thing of the past. Decriminalizing all drugs would mean that you could no longer be put in jail or prison on charges for possession of them. This would solve the issue of mass incarceration, because in 2019 alone, Drug War Facts estimates that out of the million people arrested on drug violations, 86.7% of those were for possession of a controlled substance. Decriminalizing drugs would stop the needless issue of mass incarceration, and in turn would help reduce our prison populations, which would save the governments lots of money that could be better used for other things in society. Second, it would shine light on helping addicts find a treatment rather than just face a vicious jail cycle. When someone is caught with these hard drugs, when they are decriminalized, they will no longer be arrested, but instead they could be brought into a treatment program to help their addiction. The money saved from reduced prison populations and reduced efforts to fight the war on drugs could all be used to better fund these beneficial treatment programs that should easily be accessible to all those that need help in fighting their addiction. Lastly, it could help lower the amount of drug-related crimes in America, because decriminalizing drugs would help people end their addictions. If users are able to get the treatment they need and turn their life around, we will have more active members of society positively contributing to society, rather than being stuck in the world of addictions, causing them to commit crimes like robbery, physical abuse, and assault. So how would this solution work? Decriminalizing drugs doesn't make them legal. All it does, it prevents those in possession of drugs safe from being severely punished for them. So if such a law passed, officers would simply not be able to arrest a person for the possession of any drug. That being said, if all drugs were decriminalized in America, drug addicts would finally get some help they need rather than be thrown in jail or prison, which fixes none of the true underlying issues of these people. Decriminalizing drugs would not only help the drug addicts get the help they need, but it would also benefit other aspects of society too. For example, if police are not wasting their time charging homeless folks, for example, for possession of drugs, they could be spending their time to prevent more serious issues like crime and robbery. It could also help save the government money by having less people housed in jails and prisons, which cost serious amounts of money each year. This money could go to fund better things like education, healthcare, Planned Parenthood, etc. So what are some concerns that people have about decriminalizing all drugs? Well, first, people feel like decriminalizing all drugs would dramatically increase the amount of drug usage. The fact is, people who want to use hard drugs are going to use them whether it's legal or illegal to do so. Obviously, the war on drugs has solved nothing, and a new approach to solving drug abuse is needed. Instead of instilling these harsh penalties for people who have drug problems, we should use the new wealth from decriminalizing hard drugs to help instill better forms of treatment. History has shown that prohibition tactics do not solve the problem. Alcohol was consumed more than ever during its prohibition. Marijuana, for example, locked up thousands of relatively innocent people for decades, but since its continued legalization across the states here in America, many positives have followed as a response. While decriminalizing all drugs can sound very concerning at first, remember that it could actually be used to help solve many issues of society like mass incarceration and much more. And for those who think that doing this would cause a huge outbreak in drug use, it would help the people because those who do hard drugs are going to do them regardless if they have a consequence to doing so or not. In conclusion, I have talked about the problem America faces, which is the enforcement of drug regulations that ultimately fail at helping the drug crisis. I have also addressed the cause to this problem, which was the war on drugs, the thing that started it all. Lastly, I propose to you all a solution I feel would actually help, which is the decriminalization of all drugs in America. Where we currently stand with our drug policies and laws truly are doing more harm than good for society. It is time to fight this crisis in a different manner than the way we have been trying to do so for decades. Just recently, Oregon passed Proposition 110, decriminalizing all hard drugs in their state, and this shows that Americans are ready for this new change in handling the drug crisis. If we would like to end this drug crisis we have faced in our country for years, let's start making a step towards tackling drug addictions at its true base by instilling widespread programs of treatment for those who need it, instead of putting them in a vicious jail cycle. Thank you for listening.